Everyone knows I'm totally head over heels for Tina. I've been her doormat, even took a hit for her. Gave up everything, lost my dignity. But when I got kidnapped, Tina thought I was the mastermind trying to hurt her first love, Eric. She let the kidnappers rough me up, even smirked at me. Ben, stop the act. You make me sick. Later, I figured out I messed up. Back to before the college entrance exam, in front of shocked eyes, I desperately stopped that rebellious girl, Linda. I'm here to see you, I said. Tina glared at me, slowly losing hope. So you've been after someone else all along. When the kidnappers made Tina choose, she picked her first love. That's what I expected. As she protected her pitiful first love, her annoyance towards me grew. Ben, enough with the act. Just leave. You're disgusting. Even when the knife at my throat drew blood, Tina believed the kidnapping was my own scheme, all because Eric said they went easy on me. He turned his head, showing a slap mark, something he had demanded the kidnappers to do before Tina arrived. And of course Tina bought it. Since Tina's made her choice, leave this one for the boys. Don't blame us for being harsh. Tina paused but quickly played it cool, her tone icy. Ben, I don't have time for your childish games. If you must act, at least make it believable. As it stands, why would I fall for this? Tina looked at me, eyes full of familiar disdain. Tina, I called her, a laugh escaping my lips. I seemed to have made a grave mistake. All my dignity was gone, dragged by anyone at will. Even when Tina detested me, I rushed at night to pick her up after a call, only to be mocked by her friends for being a lapdog. I even helped plan a party when sick, though it celebrated her first love's success. Then I saw a photo in her study. Tina had an unknown twin sister who died at 17. I stared at the photo's crazy scrawl, feeling I really messed up. So I dived into Linda's story. But there was hardly anything. The only thing I knew, Linda was accused of bullying at 17. Tina's family felt humiliated and changed her last name, sweeping everything under the rug, including Linda. I wanted to refuse it, but before I found the truth, I was kidnapped. Tina didn't get it at first, then sneered. Strange. I thought you believed you were right. Tina's hatred was largely because I was placed by her parents to monitor her, a humiliation in her eyes. Just over this one thing wrong. The physical pain was numbing. Eric wasn't innocent. He had them hit where clothes covered. I swallowed the metallic taste, whispering, just this one thing wrong. Tina laughed, maybe about to say something. Then she froze, distracted by the kidnappers dumping me into the water, bound and all. That probably wasn't in Tina's plan. As I was thrown overboard, I thought I saw Tina reflexively leap toward me. But it didn't matter. I might have been reborn. I looked at the faded hand-me-down clothes, my calloused hands. During the years with Tina, I kept them soft. But now someone dragged me along with harsh words. Boys with books are useless. Go work thinking you're tough. What's school gonna get you? Stunned, I forgot to struggle, letting my so-called mom drag me and tear my clothes on the ground, scraping my skin. Pain jolted me back. I struggled, let go of me. But this malnourished body was no match for a farm woman. Dredged up memories, swallowed by deep-seated fear, surged back. I bit my lip, quelling the scream, clawing desperately backward. My other hand searched for the utility knife in my bag. I always carried one. Grabbing it, a bold, familiar voice broke through. Human traffickers this brazen now? Kidnap in broad daylight? Familiar voice, familiar lines. I stared, teary-eyed, at the backlit figure. Somehow, it hurt so much. Last life it was like this deserted path at lunch. My mom lured me out, trying to drag me home. Linda had stopped her. She gave my mom cash to leave me alone for studies. Later, lacking tuition, an enterprise stepped in, owned by Tina. Linda, annoyed, pulled a wad of cash from her pocket. Is it money you want? Take it. Leave him alone. My mom counted with a smile, then acted tough. Miss, this isn't enough. Linda rolled her eyes, teen and tall, enough to draw stares. She pulled a ring off and handed it over. Trade this. My mom, with a greedy grin, reached for it, but I snatched it first. Her face fell, hand raised. You brat. But she held back. Knife in hand, I glared. She only gave you $1,000. There's 2 here, enough. Can't scam me. Linda grumbled, sidling next to me, blocking Mom's way. I tightened my grip on the utility knife I was holding, expressionless. If you keep playing games, I don't mind tearing everything apart. Aren't you most fond of your precious daughter? Maybe my eyes, determined to drag everything down with me, scared my mom. She didn't dare ask for the ring again. After cursing a few dirty words, she left in a hurry. I kept holding the utility knife until my mom's figure completely disappeared. Until Linda suddenly laughed and lightly patted my head, teasingly. You look so skinny and weak. Didn't think you'd pull out a knife. What, you think you can kill someone at your age? I didn't respond. I just quietly put the utility knife away and then silently stared at Linda. She looks exactly like Tina, the Tina I know, just much younger. The only difference, maybe, is the tiny mole on Linda's nose. You wouldn't notice it unless you really looked. Why are you staring at me? Linda touched her nose, looking exaggeratedly surprised. You're not seriously thinking you can kill someone, right? I still didn't answer. So, Linda just looked a bit stunned. Linda didn't head back to school. She just wandered around aimlessly on the streets. I followed her up to the point where she started getting fed up. Hey, you're gonna follow me into the girls' restroom too? She intentionally emphasized girls' restroom. I glanced at the school uniform tied around her waist and randomly asked, why aren't you in class? Lunch break is over. Why aren't you? Linda laughed angrily, then shot back. I got leave. That kind of threw her off. She didn't look too happy. I thought she'd be mad, but she just ran her hand through her hair and pointed at me, all confused. I need to save poor boys like you. School just holds me back from becoming a world hero. It was very middle school syndrome-ish, totally opposite of Tina. But I still mistook her for someone else. A wave of indescribable despair and sadness hit me hard. I was nearly out of breath. I was dizzy, scaring Linda. What's up with you, kid? What's your name? I heard my hoarse voice, grabbing Linda's arm. She was skinny but surprisingly strong. I need to know your name so I find you to pay you back later. I tried giving back the ring to Linda, but she refused. It was just a useless decoration to me. Linda tossed the ring into my bag without looking. I, unlike my sister, am never short on money, and that gave me an excuse for paying her back. I stared at Linda with unblinking eyes until she looked away awkwardly. Big brother's stronger than he looks. She suddenly laughed, easily freeing her arm. Want to pay me back? Sure. That little piece of metal isn't cheap. Someday you'll manage it. What a stubborn attitude. Linda mumbled, but then she smiled and tapped my head. Okay, remember this, I'm Linda. After she told me her name, she wouldn't say more. On the way back, I tried chatting with her. But every time I aimed to know more about her, she'd skillfully change the subject. Her carefree smile never left her face, so I just let it go for now. You're really smart, Linda suddenly said out of the blue, just as we reached the school gate. I didn't get it at first and looked at her after giving a You know me too? Top of the class, always outscoring Tina. Ben. Linda grinned. Yeah, I know you. I had so many questions for Linda, but the security guard had spotted us, yelling, Hey, you 2 students, why are you out during class hours? Skipping class for a date? No. I automatically turned to explain to the guard, but right then I felt a soft voice by my ear, filled with a crisp, clean smell of a girl. Keep going. I'm counting on you to take that girl down a peg. Linda laughed, then ran off before the guard reached us. She never turned back, but it was like she knew I was watching, casually waving from behind. The afternoon sun glinted on her hair, flashing a hint of red under the black. I thought it was a trick of my eyes, and then she vanished into the shadow of the corner. The other girl, she ain't from our school. You kids, always in these messes, the guard rambled on. I listened quietly, a little stunned when my hand touched something hard in my pocket. Linda's ring again. After confirming it was Linda, I slipped it back without her noticing. I owed her too much already. Linda's nonchalant voice seemed to echo, Keep going. She must have snuck the ring into my uniform pocket again at some point. The guard's lecture went on. I held the ring tight with a slight tug at my lips. Well, a few more debts won't hurt. Going back to high school isn't exactly happy for me. The suffocating family life, judgmental stares, bullying, and teachers playing favorites. It had crushed me to pieces, leaving me stuck in my little world, until I met Linda. Until I met her again. There you are again. Linda was casually smoking, eyeing me in surprise. She clicked her tongue. You should visit a temple or something. I swear you're like a magnet for bad luck, she said pointedly. Behind her, a bunch of girls, visibly scared, hovered. A few thugs she brought around them. I silently picked up books that had fallen into the muddy ground, stamped on several times. Just like before, those people enjoyed bullying me. Just like before, Linda would appear to help out. But this time I wasn't knocked out. And Linda didn't leave as soon as she took me to the hospital. Instead, she scratched her head and dropped down, helping me with the books. I'm serious, Linda said, pouting. Both times I've seen you, you're getting pushed around. You really shouldn't go pray. I know this temple that's supposed to be pretty effective. And while saying that, she started chuckling to herself. You know what? I really feel like a hero saving a damsel in distress right now. Sister Linda, you're a hero, but she's no beauty. One of the younger guys couldn't help but chime in. You always have the most to say, Linda snapped. She was about to comfort me but paused awkwardly when she noticed my dried-out hair and ill-fitting old-school uniform. Finally, she turned to the younger guy she brought along and asked stiffly, You have any tissues or handkerchiefs? Sister Linda, didn't you say carrying those things would make us look soft? Linda was momentarily taken aback. She glanced at the girls who looked pale, then turned away in disgust. Never mind, using theirs would be bad luck, Linda huffed. She wiped the dirty water off the book with her sleeve, not caring she was dirtying her expensive jacket. Check if the notes in there are still usable, she said, handing the book to me. Her hand was long and pale, but somehow had picked up a stain on the fingertips. Suddenly, I remembered waking up in the hospital last time. The stack of books on the bedside table was carefully dried of dirty water and neatly placed close to me. Linda, I snapped back to reality, not opening the book but looking at her with a shaky voice. I can't find you. I can't find Linda. All I knew about Linda was her name and that she was Tina's sister. Other than that, I knew nothing. I remembered the uniform tied around her waist that day. It was the standard one everyone had to wear at our school. But there was no Linda at school, only Tina. And Linda would quietly pass away at 17. This year. Yet I couldn't find Linda. Not in this life, not in the last. This realization startled me into panic. So I decided to take a gamble. I followed these girls, hearing their relentless insults and watching them stomp on my books. Linda appeared, raising an eyebrow, looking both disgusted and speechless. It's you again, she said. Linda was caught off guard by my statement. You can't beat me, she instinctively replied. Her younger guy couldn't help but laugh. Realizing it, he awkwardly coughed and shoved the book back into my hands. She pointed to herself, am a classic troublemaker. She pointed to me, and you're the good student who can outdo Tina on exams. If you hang with me, what's that all about? She chuckled at her own words until she saw my silent stare. Then her smile slowly faded. Wait, are you serious? Linda's voice grew panicked. I even heard her mutter under her breath. Oh man. If Leo hears you want to hang out with me, she'll kill me. Leo was my homeroom teacher during freshman year, the only teacher who treated me really well. Linda knew Leo, maybe even had a good relationship with her. I made a mental note of that. Then I called her name Linda. What? I smiled at her, then walked over to the lead girl and slapped her sharply, a few times. Everyone was stunned, including Linda except the girl who started screaming like crazy. There's a fruit knife in my backpack, I said calmly. I really have nothing, so I don't care if I lose something. Tina once called me a calm lunatic after a man went on a rampage on the street with a knife. Tina was with her just returned from abroad first love. I stepped in and took a knife wound for her, and as a result was able to subdue the man. Back then, Tina was terrified, her hands trembling as she covered my wound. "Psycho," she yelled at me, tears in her eyes. "You might seem calm all the time, but deep down you're a lunatic." I didn't respond, just smiled at her. Because back then I thought of Tina as Linda, and I had to protect her. She wasn't wrong, I really was a lunatic. "Are you scared?" I asked the girl in front of me as she clamped her mouth shut. I gave her a reassuring smile. "There's nothing to be scared of. After all, I haven't gotten to." Linda jumped in before I could finish. She cursed lowly under her breath and pulled me away from the girl. Then she turned to me and asked, "Where'd you get the knife? Didn't I take away your box cutter? The ring you gave me could buy a lot of them." Linda was caught off guard, her expression turning fierce as she raised her voice. "Was that ring meant for knife buying? So Linda, I'm not the good student you think I am." I looked up at Linda. From a long time ago, back when my parents beat and scolded me and wouldn't let me go to school, to all the times I was bullied and tormented, the string of logic in me was always tight. Tight enough that even if just a straw fell, everything would collapse. My box cutter was always with me. So the Linda from my past life would never know how great a thing she did unknowingly. "Linda," I licked my dry lips, cautiously holding onto a small piece of her clothing. "Can I follow you?" I had followed Tina countless times, which only made her more annoyed with me. But I wanted to follow Linda. I wanted to protect Linda. I didn't want her to hate me. So I quickly let go of Linda's clothing and waited quietly for judgment. Sounds of gasps filled the air from Linda's underlings, followed by teasing. But Linda remained silent. After a long pause, she frowned and picked up my backpack, pulled out the fruit knife, and clicked her tongue. But after a glance, she put it back, along with the books she'd wiped clean. "I'll give you my answer the third time we meet," she said. Probably shocked by my actions that day, Linda had her underlings take turns following me until they saw I got home safely. After all, because of the money Linda gave, my mom stayed calm for a while. Though now and then, she'd yell cryptically about raising a beast who dared to threaten her with a knife. I guess things really turned upside down. But she didn't dare say it to my face, and she didn't dare hit me either. My dad left for work out of town, so he wasn't around. I ignored her, though occasionally I'd sharpen a knife in front of her, scaring my mom enough that she wouldn't let my sister near me. Those classmates who ganged up on me were punished. Leo himself talked to the parents. They tried to argue, but Leo wasn't having it. He showed them a video given by Linda. Maybe she did something like that in a past life. Nothing was more convincing than that video. Even when a few guys accused me of carrying a fruit knife to threaten them, nobody believed them. So, I became the complete victim of this bullying. They were made to apologize to me publicly. After everyone left the office, Leo asked me about the knife. One of the guys I'd threatened yelled to search my backpack, but he didn't find what he was looking for. Leo and I had a silent standoff until I just tapped my pocket. Leo's eyes widened, and he was so mad he had to gulp down a cup of cold tea to calm down. "Troublemaker. All of you are troublemakers," he scolded, pointing at me, just like Linda. "Can't be controlled, stubborn as hell. No wonder he kept telling me to keep an eye on you. I always thought you were pretty quiet. Didn't think you'd be this shady." I stood there, saying nothing, taking his lecture. It only made Leo angrier. He slammed the table, said even that unbothered look of mine was exactly like Linda's. The class bell thankfully interrupted his scolding. "Ben, remember," he waved me off to class, but then called me back. "There are many paths to take. If one doesn't work, find another. You won't get stuck. Life's long. Don't ruin it over a rash moment." I nodded and then asked, "Why isn't Linda coming to school?" Leo wasn't surprised that I asked about her. He laughed. "Everyone thinks I'm some info dealer. If you want to know about her, ask her yourself. All I can say is, Linda's got her own path to walk." I nodded, showing I got it. I didn't know what Linda's path was, but I was determined to help her walk it safely this time around. That was my chosen path. I saw Linda a week later at a physics competition. It was at another school. She came to pick up Tina. This was the first time I saw Tina since my rebirth. Tina seemed a lot friendlier than Linda, but she still had that friendly smile. They looked exactly the same, yet now I could easily tell them apart. My seat was in front of Tina. She looked a bit surprised when she saw me, then gave a slightly awkward smile, nothing like the sharpness and mockery from the past. I quickly looked away, quietly waiting for the competition to start. Did I hate Tina? Not really. From the start, I was the one who mistook things and thought I was being nice by sticking around her, constantly bothering her. It was only natural that Tina didn't like me. Tina finished a few minutes before me. As I left the school grounds, I saw her standing with Linda. Linda was wearing a baseball cap and a mask, casually resting a hand on Tina's shoulder. Her laid-back vibe was completely different from Tina's. I walked over to Linda. Tina noticed me first. She hesitated, as if she wanted to look away but couldn't help smiling a little. Tina watched me, her gaze never leaving until I passed by her and stood by Linda. Linda, I said, only looking at her. I've come to see you. It was our third meeting. Linda had once said she'd give me answers on our third meeting. You recognized me even when I'm in disguise? Linda was surprised, then laughed. You really are stubborn. Want to grab a bite? My treat. I nodded. I didn't look at Tina again, so I didn't see her go pale when I said Linda's name. Tina, you coming? Linda asked. It's just a simple noodle shop, probably not your style. Tina's a rich girl, picky about food. Linda was nothing like her that way. I thought Tina might refuse. But, surprisingly, she agreed, her voice a bit hoarse. The noodle shop owner knew Linda well, gave us extra side dishes. Linda and I enjoyed our food, but Tina only had a few bites and set down her chopsticks, frowning a bit. I knew you wouldn't like it, Linda teased, handing her a bottle of water. Should I have the driver pick you up? No, Tina declined, looking at me with some unreadable emotion. How did you meet my sister? Tina asked. Linda saved me. Twice I replied, deciding to tell Tina. So, I'm really grateful to her. Ben's the one I told you about before, Linda said, opening a beer, and then raised an eyebrow at me. Want a drink? I shook my head. She laughed. See? A guy who doesn't smoke or drink, yet brave enough to take a knife to his bullies. The comment seemed to shock Tina. Her lips moved silently, before she softly said, I didn't even know. You think just 'cause you're a bit smarter, you know everything? Linda misunderstood her sister's words. Tina kept silent, not explaining further. Not long after, Tina was picked up by her driver. You know Tina's not well, and you bring her to a place like this? Uncle Wong's tone wasn't as respectful to Linda as it was to Tina. It even carried a hint of resentment. I always knew Tina's health was delicate. Her family was super careful about it. Still, even with all that, this guy's attitude towards Linda really pissed me off. So, I stepped in front of Linda. My tone was harsh. Tina was the one who insisted on tagging along. Linda had tried to talk her out of it. Tina's eyelashes fluttered. She looked up at me, kind of in disbelief. But Linda just chuckled and teased me. Standing in front of me like that, what do you think you can do if something really happened? She's always had this carefree, nonchalant attitude. Even if misunderstood, she couldn't care less about explaining. And that got me even more fired up, including being mad at Linda. I glared at her hard. Realizing I was actually angry, Linda awkwardly scratched her nose and then tried to soothe me skillfully. I was just joking. Our Ben here is so strong he could take down 10 guys all by himself. I said nothing and kept glaring at her. It was really my idea to come along. Tina suddenly spoke up, her voice thick and tight. This got nothing to do with Linda. Uncle Wong looked a bit awkward, but in the end, he just glanced at Linda and then left with Tina. I kept glaring until I thought my eyes would pop out. My face suddenly felt cool. It was Linda pressing a cold soda to my cheek. You're all red. I don't even know what you're mad about, she said, though her eyes were filled with laughter. Why don't you explain? I suddenly remembered the stuff I found about Linda before. People would call her uneducated, violent, and troublesome. It's like these had become her nickname, but I didn't believe it. Linda thought for a moment, then replied seriously because I didn't grow a mouth. Linda, she responded, then reached out to press my head hard. I'm not deaf, you know, I can hear. She interrupted as I tried to argue, "You clearly—" "Tina and I look exactly alike." Linda leaned down, those bright eyes staring into mine, her expression unusually serious. "She looks good, is nice, and her grades are great. If you're looking for something to chase or just like this face, she's a much better choice. If you think you owe me just because I helped you before, you really don't have to." Linda chuckled, straightened up, her voice casual. "I have a bunch of flaws. If there's one good thing, maybe it's that I occasionally do something nice. If I see a stray cat or dog on the street, I'll give them a sausage. I drop a coin for a beggar, let alone help a poor guy." My anger slowly faded. Quietly, I watched Linda again, sensing her deliberate detachment. She seemed like she didn't care about anything, but I noticed her hands shaking slightly at her side while saying those things. Words not matching the heart. So I told Linda about myself. When I was born, my mom wanted to strangle me, but she didn't succeed because people in the village stopped her. Later, she wanted to sell me, but I knew my way back. They didn't want me to go to school, so I always worked hard to pay for it myself, never gave them any reason to force me to drop out. Linda grew quiet too. "So Linda, you'll never know how heroic it was just for you to stop my mom that day." My vision grew blurry. I couldn't even make out Linda's face anymore. "Tina's great, but even if she's the best person on earth, she's not the light I want to follow. So even if you don't need it—" I tried to continue but found myself tongue-tied. What if Linda didn't need it? What if she, like Tina, didn't really need my kind of useless gratitude? Suddenly, I felt lost and unsure, until Linda burst out laughing. Her laughter was exaggerated. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. "It's the first time I've heard someone describe me as a light. Most people just call me trash." Once she'd had enough laughing, she put down her hands, giving me a smile full of understanding and exasperation. "Ben, you are such a peculiar, stubborn kid," she added, grinning. Linda allowed me to stick around. I thought it was so I could repay her more, but actually, she ended up looking after me most of the time. Whenever she got breakfast, she'd buy an extra, saying a little brother dropped out, but she was used to buying it. "If you don't want it, tell Mike to toss it." So, I ate breakfast every day. Linda asked me to tell her more school stories when we met up. "Nothing to do most days, and when you're bored, you'd want a bit of fun," Linda chuckled. "I remember a bunch of oddballs at school. Make sure you spill the tea on them. I didn't interact with many people before, so naturally, I didn't know much. But Linda wanted to hear about it, so I started trying to connect with classmates just to have something to tell. The stories would crack Linda up every time. "I'm curious how you can keep a straight face while saying the funniest things." Linda would laugh, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes, encouraging me. "Keep it up. There are plenty more weirdos for you to uncover." So, I kept chatting with classmates, talking about school gossip, until one day my typically distant desk mate commented. "I thought you were some untouchable genius who looked down on us," he said. "Turns out you like hearing gossip too. Seems like we have something in common." That's when it hit me, my relationships with classmates had gotten better. For the first time, I felt truly part of the class. When I realized it, at our next meeting, I solemnly told Linda, "I really want to do something for you." Linda smiled and asked back, "Do you think gratitude is just a one-way thing?" Her question caught me off guard. In the years when I mistook Tina for Linda, that's exactly how I acted. I always listened to Tina, protected her, followed her wishes, even if it meant annoying her. I've been trying to repay Tina this way for 5 years. Isn't that right? Linda didn't seem surprised by my reaction. So she patiently asked me, "You told me gossip about the second school to entertain me. Is it true?" I hesitated for a moment and nodded. I felt happy. "Can you take that as repaying me, then?" I nodded reluctantly. "So what's bothering you?" Linda looked at me with a smile. "Ben, why don't you try repaying in a way that makes you happy too?" Linda told me there's always another way, even for repaying someone. A path that isn't full of thorns. A path where you can meet warm people. "You're too young, yet you think too much," Linda teased me. "Well, if you really want to do something, lend me your notes for a few days." Most of the boys under her wing had dropped out of school due to family issues. Linda always said she was leading a group of troublemakers. But ever since meeting Linda, those guys never did anything bad again. Even being a troublemaker requires some culture now, Linda told me seriously. Otherwise, when someone curses you, you might think they're praising you. Linda always believed I would become the top scorer in the college entrance exam, because she thought her sister, Tina, would be the future top scorer. But I managed to surpass Tina in the exams, which meant more than beating her sister. When my notes were returned, they were even more organized, especially in math. Key points I ignored were highlighted, even linked to previously learned concepts. Linda said it might be a talented student of hers showing potential. But Mike secretly told me that Linda organized it all. Despite her strong subject bias, Linda was particularly good at math. Mike looked proud when he said that. Why doesn't she come to school? I asked for the second time and got the same response. You'll have to ask Linda yourself. Mike scratched his head, a bit embarrassed. Linda doesn't want us to talk about it. So I went to ask Linda. I thought you'd wait a while before asking, she said. But will you tell me? I focused on Linda's red hair. What I saw that day wasn't a mistake. Linda had dyed her hair bold red. The first time we met, she had filled in for Tina, who was sick, wearing a black wig. No, Linda told me frankly, getting to know me isn't a good idea. Linda called me wooden both in name and nature. So I didn't ask further. Instead, I copied the notes Linda organized for me and shared them with my classmates. The monthly test was approaching quickly. Oh my God. My seatmate jumped up and down, hugging me after the exam. Ben, your notes saved me, especially in science. There were several points I overlooked, and they were all on the test. I love you to pieces. Other classmates who used the notes came to thank me too, which drew in more curious students asking, what notes? What notes? Save us, genius. I lent my notes and told them it wasn't me who organized them. It was Linda. Linda? One well-informed classmate's face changed. The twin sister of Tina from first high? I paused, then nodded. Yes. Then I don't want them. He immediately tossed the notes away with disdain. A scumbag who seduced boys and caused harm in middle school. What good notes can they have? You should keep away from her. Who knows when she might cause trouble again. Full of contempt and arrogance, he called her a scumbag, trash. After venting, he stepped on the notes as if they were filthy mud. Everyone was stunned. I stared at the footprints on the notes, my mind went blank. By the time I came to my senses, I was already in a scuffle with him. My mom wouldn't come to school and Leo was on a business trip. Finally, Linda found someone to solve the problem for me. I get it now, why you insist on sticking with me, Linda smirked. You're looking for someone to clean up your mess. Hanging my head in silence, although being technically 8 years older than the 17-year-old Linda, I couldn't argue back. But to my surprise, Tina showed up too. She stood beside Linda, silently watching as she tended my wounds. Then, when Linda stepped out, Tina suddenly said, Ben wouldn't fight. I continued bandaging without pause. So she repeated softly, 16-year-old Ben doesn't fight. He's timid, afraid of causing trouble. But 25-year-old Ben does. Her voice trembled as she spoke, and she fixed her gaze on me with teary eyes. So, Ben, you're back, aren't you? I rarely thought back to my high school years, but Tina's words made me chuckle. You're right. I smiled at her genuinely. 16-year-old Ben was forced home after bullying, missing the college entrance exam. Later, thanks to Tina's family support, he repeated and attended college. Seeing the girl who helped him back then at Tina's house, he felt even more obligated to repay them. I paused, then shook my head helplessly. I've never regretted anything I've done. But, Tina, I think I might have messed up this time. Ben. Tina seemed to sense what I was about to say. She started breathing heavily. She hasn't been well. Now she's gasping, clutching her heart, her face pale as a sheet. So I didn't keep talking. If something happens to Tina, Linda will be really worried. I'm not surprised by Tina's rebirth. It's not like I saw it coming, but, well, 17-year-old Tina or 25-year-old Tina, neither really means much to me anymore. Tina knows me too. So, after catching her breath, she asks me angrily, so what you've been focused on has never been me, right? Even after learning the truth, you didn't even bother to care about me at all, Did you? I kept quiet. Tina's eyes slowly filled with hopelessness. She grabbed my wrist, squeezing like she might crush me, and asked, word by word, why do you think just saying I did something wrong means you can easily leave it all behind? Ben? Why? Well, I've paid the price, I said. Her grip hurt, but it was bearable. So I smiled at her and said softly, I died. You know, isn't that enough to satisfy your anger? The word die must have hit some nerve, because she let go and laughed bitterly. Yeah, so you died. Served you right. Tina lost her usual warmth and went back to being sharp. Ben, you should really see how you looked after you died. Your body was so swollen from the water, you couldn't even recognize yourself. You should have seen how hideous you looked. Maybe she wanted to provoke me, but Tina didn't know that I gave up on those useless emotions long ago. So, I sighed and said, thanks for the trouble of fishing my body out. Must have cost quite a bit. Huh? My words choked her up. She wanted to say more when Linda walked in and interrupted us. What body? Linda caught some words, confused as she looked at us, then laughed. Didn't you just hurt your hand? Relax, not gonna die. But if you ever fight again, I swear I'll knock you out myself. Linda looked at me with a serious smile, then ruffled my hair in frustration, calling me stubborn. Tina watched us interact, staying silent. The fight was eventually left unresolved. But because of it, I finally learned why Linda hadn't continued her studies. Someone saw a panicked boy run out of an alley, clothes disheveled. He was so scared he didn't see where he was going and ran into the street, getting hit by a car. Linda ran out after him. He didn't die but turned into a vegetative state, still in the hospital. That area had no surveillance cameras, so Linda, who came out after him, got labeled as the culprit. No one believed her, not even her own parents, when she said she was trying to protect the boy. Since they couldn't find the person Linda claimed tried to entice him, and the only person who could clear her name was in a coma, everyone thought Linda was making it up. No one believed her because they all saw her as a delinquent, and you can't trust a delinquent, right? Tina's parents forced Linda out of school, brought her to their home, changed her last name, and handled the incident with a firm hand. But back then, young Linda wasn't a delinquent at all. Leo, while telling me this, seemed so angry. She just wanted to give those kids a chance to do better, Leo said. But no one believed, not even me, that someone could be so kind-hearted, especially not a middle schooler. Do you know why Linda got into fights? Leo asked me. After a moment of silence, I responded, because of Tina. Tina wasn't well, and her entire family treated her like a fragile object. But they couldn't always be around her. So, the one there for Tina the most was Linda. See? Even you know why. How can her parents not see it? Leo's smile was sarcastic. I thought of Tina's parents from my past life and figured maybe they knew from the start. Tina's family cared a lot about their reputation. Even if Linda fought to protect Tina, raising a fist made her a perpetrator, not a victim. They could accept Linda being a temporary victim, but not a constant aggressor. So they chose Tina over Linda, and Tina was the obedient, high-achieving child who could benefit the family more. Ben. Leo patted my shoulder with a sigh. Sometimes I think you two are really similar. Things were dug up again. What Tina's family suppressed with harsh tactics led to even harsher backlash this time. I caused this backlash. I searched for Linda but couldn't find her. I figured she was upset. Before I could find her to explain, my dad came back. He dragged me home, talking about how I fought and was out of control. No one stopped him. Guess they thought I needed disciplining with him back. My mom added fuel to the fire, embellishing how unruly I'd been. Soon, he'll probably just run off with a woman. She spat, cursing me with the vilest words. My little sister joined in, throwing toy cars at me. Don't run, make money, buy me toys. A metal toy car hit my forehead, blood streaming down, blurring my eyes. I just watched this family in silence. It was probably because my mom reminded him. As soon as my dad dragged me home, the first thing he did was strip off my clothes. He found the knife I had hidden on me. I stood there almost naked in front of them, feeling numb and indifferent. They locked me up at home to punish me. My mom starved me for days. Any little bit of weight I'd gained with Linda's help was completely gone. Does that factory still want him? I heard my dad ask my mom. Go talk to them. See if they'll pay more. Let's get rid of this kid, he said. They hid all the sharp objects in the house to keep me from escaping. Except for mealtime, my hands and feet were almost always tied up. It felt like I had returned to the darkest times of my past life. But this time I was calm. I had a plan. The worst-case scenario was all-out destruction. What I didn't expect was Tina barging in with the police. It was the day I was supposed to be sold to the factory. To avoid any mishaps, those two had practically finalized the deal and were ready to send me off immediately. There I was, tied up, while the man was counting money with a cigarette dangling from his lips. People around congratulating him. That's when Tina came in with the cops. Bastards, she spat, eyes blazing with anger. She was shaking as she untied me, throwing her clothes over the glaring factory uniform I was wearing. Besides those few words, though, Tina didn't say anything else. Someone reported illegal trading, the police accused. It's just work. Just work, my dad grinned, explaining to the police. Kids in the countryside start working early. We were just letting him work in the factory until he's of age to get paid. It's not illegal. Yeah, exactly, my mom chimed in. Plus, it's family business. You cops can't interfere in family matters, right? The man was too shocked to make a sound. I'm reporting them. My voice came out raspy from days without food or water. They tried to sell me. At that, the cops' expressions turned serious. I had an older brother, but when I was old enough to work, I never saw him again. My mom sold him as labor to a widow. My supposed father tied him up and sent him there. He even broke his leg to keep him from escaping. So I knew from a young age what awaited me. They discovered I was good at school and decided to let me study, thinking I'd be worth more. I thought my brother was the first victim until I learned it wasn't their first time. He wasn't the first boy they ruined. In my past life, I spent a lot of effort collecting evidence and personally sent them to prison. This time around, it was much easier. I led the police to the basement where 3 unconscious boys were kept. My mom had a ledger in her room, documenting every child they had trafficked and their selling price. The latest entry was my name, $3,000. With all the evidence, those 2 were taken away by the police right away. Before being taken, my dad glared at me, seething, and my mom cursed at me in coarse language. My little sister didn't hesitate. She ran up to me with her tiny toy car, yelling, "I'll beat you, you worthless brat." She was just 6 years old. Tina stepped between us, effortlessly stopping her. "Get lost," she said, making my sister cry. To help with the investigation, Tina and I went to the station. Listening to them thank Tina over and over, I felt dazed. By the time we left, it was almost night. Tina had kept a polite smile all day, but now she rubbed her face. "I still like you better with red hair," I said. She turned to me, about to say something, but I interrupted her calmly. Tina blinked. "Redhead's my sister," she insisted. I stopped in my tracks, telling her, "Only Linda can take care of me. Only Linda can take me away." Tina, or Linda, who had switched identities with her again, laughed with annoyance. "Fine," she said, storming ahead. "You wait here and see if she comes for you." I stayed quiet, watching Linda leave. It started raining later on, and I found a bench to sit on. I thought about what I could do for Linda, only to realize with frustration how much I'd been troubling her. It wasn't like before with Tina. No matter how much Tina resented me, she couldn't fault my work. I always fixed everything for her. So why was it all different now? Lost in thought, I didn't look up until a familiar voice cut through the rain. "Don't you know to find shelter when it rains?" Linda was back, soaked through, and she didn't say a word before pulling me to my feet. "Linda," I called her name with a smile. "I really don't have a home now." There was no sadness when I said it, only relief. I told Tina once before, that was the only time I let my guard down with her. But she just said, "Ben, you think you're any better than your parents?" So I never mentioned it again. But this time was different. This time I had Linda. Cautiously, I asked her a question I never had the courage to ask in my past life. "So, Linda, can you look after me again?" Linda paused, But this time she didn't deny it. Instead, she smirked at me with a feigned annoyance. When have I not? I've practically waited on you hand and foot. I couldn't help but laugh, though my eyes stung. Linda always scolded me for being so rigid. Call you a wooden block once, and you become one, huh? Gonna drink rainwater and soak up nature's energy? She joked. But when she saw my injuries, she fell silent, finally swearing under her breath. Those bastards. I should have kicked them harder back there. She tried to change the subject to distract me. Finally, things were okay. I thought you were mad, I said, looking down at my bandaged wound, feeling a bit dazed. I clearly said I wanted to repay you, yet I always seemed to cause you trouble. I thought you were mad and that's why I couldn't find you, I admitted. Why would you think I'm mad? She asked. Because I brought up things you'd rather forget. Just because I don't want to talk about something doesn't mean others won't bring it up. I can't stop everyone's chatter, Linda said with a smile. Then she reassured me, I'm not mad. I just had some things to handle those days, that's all. If I were truly mad, I wouldn't have gone through all the trouble to save you. Later, I found out that when that issue resurfaced, Linda's angry parents forced her back home. She worried I wouldn't be able to find her and would overthink or get into trouble. So those days, Linda was trying to find a way out. Eventually, Tina suggested they swap identities. Linda made herself look sick like Tina by starving herself. Only then she managed to escape by swapping identities. But Linda never told me any of this. She simply said, Linda's identity can't be seen at the police station. So how did you recognize me? It was clear Linda was more interested in this. She touched her chin, amused. Even my parents couldn't tell us apart. I didn't know how to explain that when Linda was in front of me. I just knew it was her. If I had to describe it, maybe it was my subconscious fear of being wrong and never finding her again. So I told her I won't mistake you for someone else a second time. Linda thought I meant I had mixed her up with Tina at first. So she didn't think much of it, just smiled. Soon, Leo arrived hurriedly after getting the news. Without saying much, he just patted me on the shoulder, eyes slightly red, and comforted me softly. Let's go. Your teacher's wife is waiting for you at home. Linda didn't come along. As Leo was about to take me away, she suddenly asked, You trust me just like that? Her face still wore that carefree smile, but somehow, I sensed her hidden cautiousness. So I thought for a moment and answered, I'm a stubborn person, you know. I stick to what I believe in. Linda slowly put away her smile and finally sighed. What an odd person you are. My relationship with Linda seemed to have grown closer. She didn't run around much anymore. Instead, Leo nagged her to start relearning high school stuff. A sister should set a good example, he'd say. Linda wanted to refuse, but seeing me watch her, she swallowed her words. She brushed her nose and sighed. Fine then. Because of what happened, no high school would accept Linda. So she had to study at Leo's house. Mike was right, Linda was indeed really good at certain subjects. Even with just a bit of self-study, she scored close to perfect in math on the exams. But her humanities scores were terrible, almost driving Leo, the literature teacher, to spank her out of frustration. You're just trying to infuriate me, aren't you? He'd rage. At these times, Linda would become unusually compliant. She'd lower her head and listen attentively to Leo's scolding, like a girl pretending to be sorry. But she'd still sneak winks at me when Leo wasn't paying attention, with a look that said, I hear you, but I won't change. That unbothered demeanor was just like Linda. I recalled Leo's angry words to me before and couldn't help but smile. The Linda standing here now was lively and real, far from just lines of cold text on a piece of paper. So I thought I should do a bit more. I visited the family of the comatose boy. Tina's family covered all the medical expenses. Linda would also visit him. But the family blamed Linda for their son's situation, so every time she came, they'd yell at her to leave. Yet, Linda kept visiting, quietly leaving things before going away, even though they were always thrown out. When they heard I was visiting because of Linda, the smiles on their faces disappeared immediately. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, I quickly said, blocking the door with my hand before they could shut it. The door pinched my hand, making a dull thud. My hand instantly turned red and swollen, but I didn't feel the pain. Just give me a few minutes, I almost pleaded. Looking at my hand, they eventually stayed silent. So, I shared a story from my Leos and the perspectives of the boys Linda led. I took out a recorder. The boys clubbed together their savings to buy the most expensive one, thinking only the best was worthy of Linda. But in reality, they just had so much to say. It was full of their words. I don't have parents. My grandma raised me by collecting trash. Before meeting Linda, I didn't know people ate 3 meals a day, said a chubby boy. Surprisingly, he used to be skin and bones before meeting Linda. My parents got divorced and didn't want me, so I became a thief. I stole Linda's stuff the most. But she didn't call the cops. She beat me up and made me write socialist core values 100 times if I stole, 100 times if I got caught, said Mike. As he spoke, he started reciting socialist values, only to be interrupted by others pulling him away. And me, another chimed in, I have many sisters and no money for school. Linda paid for my tuition. When my grandma got sick, it was Linda who paid the hospital bill. Line after line spoke of their gratitude towards Linda. The family sat in silence and listened till the end, not saying a word. Finally, the mom just couldn't hold back and burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. The girl's dad hugged his wife silently, his eyes red, and told me, "We all know that a true criminal wouldn't feel guilty, especially when the law can't convict her." But Linda kept coming back every week, for 4 years straight. Even after one time when I beat her black and blue, she still came back without a word. We all know this. As he spoke, the dad started to choke up too. But we don't have any other options. We really don't. We're just an average family. We can't afford our daughter's high medical bills. This was the only way, he said. I was speechless. I know how desperate poverty can make people, especially when life and death are on the line. So even though I opened my mouth, I couldn't bring myself to scold them. We'll try to make things clear, the girl's mom said, wiping away her tears. But our testimony won't make a big difference. These parents speaking up for Linda won't clear her name. It might just make others believe they've been bribed. I know, I said, trying to calm down and forced a smile. Only if Lily wakes up, we can prove Linda's innocence. We really didn't know if Lily would ever wake up. At that, Lily's mom broke down crying again. She'll wake up, I said, looking at the boy on the hospital bed, sounding more certain than I felt. It left her parents speechless. As they walked me out, the dad couldn't help but ask, "Do you really believe in her?" Even her own parents didn't believe she didn't do it. Belief might not be the right word, I said, thinking. Then looking out at the sunshine, I remembered how Linda always walked in the shadows when we first met. So I just smiled. I just want Linda to walk confidently in the sunlight. The dad had no words. His gaze drifted past me. Linda. I didn't know how long she'd been standing there or how much she'd heard. She just casually walked over and, patting my head, apologized to Lily's parents. "Sorry about this kid bothering you." "Oh, it's fine," they replied. Linda dropped off some stuff without a word and took me to see the doctor. She quickly noticed me trying to hide my hand, and I should have just ignored it all along. "You should let your hand get crippled so you can't take the college entrance exam," Linda said with a mocking laugh. Her sarcasm hit me hard, leaving me too guilty to talk back. Even the doctor couldn't take it and tried to defend me, but Linda wasn't having it. Leaving the hospital, Linda stayed silent. I couldn't help asking, "Mike and the others mentioned you went out today. You think those punks can keep anything from me?" Linda said, turning to me with a wry grin. "I can tell what they're up to just by looking at them." I stayed quiet. "Got anything else to say?" "Yeah," I hesitated but said, "They believe you didn't do it too." But I didn't see any surprise on Linda's face. She just nodded calmly. "I know," she said. "You know, they need to hate me to have a reason to keep pushing on." Linda replied with a shrug. "Doesn't really cost me anything." But how could it not cost anything? She couldn't go to school because of this and had to endure all those looks and insults. How's that nothing? I got so worked up, I couldn't choose my words. "People say you're the godfather. Then you're the saint." "You're right," Linda agreed, nodding. "If I wasn't, I wouldn't have picked up all you troublesome folks." I couldn't win against Linda, so I just shut up in frustration, glaring at her with eyes welling up. Why were you crying? It wasn't till I felt warmth on my face that I realized I was already crying. With a sigh, Linda pulled out a small pack of tissues from her pocket, the kind with floral prints and a scent. You're getting all snotty now, she joked. Didn't you say carrying tissues is sissy? I snatched the tissues from her and couldn't help but retort. Yeah, Linda chuckled. Isn't that just me? I didn't have what it takes to out stubborn Linda. At least it got me to cool down. Linda tried to talk me into calming down anyway. She's always been flexible like that. But then she asked, do you really believe she'll wake up? She has to, I answered firmly. Linda paused, stunned, then laughed softly, calling me a brat with a sigh and a smile. Thanks, you guys. Later that day, I exaggerated and told Leo all about it. He pulled out a belt and gave Linda a good thrashing. But before he was done, he ended up crying himself. So Linda didn't even try to dodge. She just let Leo hit her while gently comforting him, even though she was the one who deserved comfort. Leo realized this soon enough and stopped, turning to make a big lunch with our mentor's wife. As for me, after tattling, I made a face at Linda when she glared my way. She pretended to threaten me but soon broke into a smile. Seeing her smile, I suddenly realized how much I've changed. Words like vibrant and alive started to apply to me. In my past life, I was only ever called things like numb or a calm lunatic. But maybe this isn't so bad. I told myself that and couldn't help but sneak in a smile. Everything seemed to be heading in a good direction. So good that I almost forgot that in another life, Linda died at age 17. And I still don't know why. Linda's family kept everything locked up. When I tried asking Tina, she died in that kidnapping. After waking from a nightmare, I felt like a bird startled by danger. It seemed I'd reverted to my past self, paranoid and yet calmly insane. I went to see Tina. I tried to get details out of her about Linda's death in our past life and tried hard to avoid any confrontation. But Tina wouldn't tell me a thing, even when I begged her on my knees. It was like she turned back into the superior Tina again with that mocking tone, saying, "What, you want to protect my sister like you tried to protect me in our past life? Ben, don't even think about it." It must have been something about me kneeling there that triggered her. Tina looked a bit crazy. She squatted down close to me and smiled as she said, "Oh, you know why I was healthy in our past life? Because what was beating inside my chest was my sister's heart." I jerked my head up, instinctively grabbing her collar, but she calmly pried my fingers loose one by one. Then she said, word for word, "Someone like you who doesn't know what love is, everything you do just feels like a burden, painful even. Ben, why'd you run away? Wouldn't it be better just to rot at home?" "Tina." Linda's furious voice cut her off. I was in a daze for a moment, and when I snapped out of it, Linda and Tina were already fighting. Tina didn't fight back. She just took a second to look at me with that familiar mocking smile, amplifying the panic inside me. So when Linda took me away, I was completely out of it. "Don't listen to what that brat says." Linda was a bit exasperated. "She's been acting weird lately, rambling nonsense at home. Don't let it get to you." I still kept my head down, lost in thought, until I heard Linda let out a barely audible sigh. She let go of my hand, took 2 steps forward, then turned back with open arms. "You want to cry in your auntie's arms?" Her tone teasing. But this time I didn't even care to be mad. I just rushed into her embrace, holding on tight enough to feel myself shaking. "What are you so afraid of?" She patted my back like soothing a child. "You're all grown up now." Linda, Linda, I kept calling her name over and over, like it was the only thing keeping me going. Finally, through tears, I choked out, "I don't want you to die." "Phooey, phooey, phooey, I won't die," Linda feigned disdain, spitting several times. Her chin rested on my shoulder, so I couldn't see how soft her gaze was. I could only hear her say, "I won't die. After all, I have to be there when my future valedictorian friend appears on TV, only to tell everyone that this valedictorian is a crybaby." But Linda didn't keep her promise. She almost died trying to save someone. Linda saved 3 boys from drowning, but the last one kicked at her in panic, and she didn't make it up. When I rushed to the scene, cluelessly staring at the calm water, My hands and feet went numb. She touched me, the rescued boy cried out. She kept grabbing me, so I kicked her away. That's not how you're supposed to save someone. Everyone comforted the boy. Some even recognized Linda, sneering, knew she wasn't such a saint. She's done stuff like this before. A burst of anger surged inside me, but I forced it down because now wasn't the time. I looked at the water, involuntarily remembering the feeling of drowning to death in my past life. I was terrified, trembling with fear, but I still rushed out because Linda was there. I had to find Linda, but Tina stopped me. She held me tight, her voice trembling. You can't swim. You go in and it's a death sentence. I've already sent someone to save my sister. Don't worry, she'll be fine. I couldn't hear anything, acting like a beast, pulling and biting at Tina. Yet she gritted her teeth, refusing to let go of me, until Linda was saved. She was rushed to the hospital after emergency CPR, and Tina still didn't release me. I sat on the ground, drained, almost suffocating. It wasn't until I heard someone say scum like her should just die that I turned my head, cold and rigid. I stood up, took slow steps toward them. Whenever Linda was around, she'd confiscate anything sharp from me. But after that dream, I secretly hid one anyways. So when I pulled out the knife, panic screams erupted. But I couldn't hear them, couldn't see anything but red. I always knew there was a complete maniac inside me. Only Linda could chain it up, lock it all down. But Linda wasn't there. Linda's alive. Tina's scream cut through the chaos, clear in my ears. Gripping her heart painfully, she still pushed forward, step by step. Linda's not hurt. But if you get hurt, do you know how upset she'll be when she wakes up? Did you think only you wanted to save her? I wanted to too. Tina looked at me, veins bulging, as she painfully snatched the knife from my grip. Let me take you to see Linda. She was shaking, even more than I was. I'll take you to her. Linda made it, but having been underwater too long, she fell into a coma. The only good news was that Linda's got a strong will to live. Unlike last time when she didn't want to live at all. Tina was silent for a long moment, broke the silence rasping. She said long ago, a respected priest told Linda her fate. There'd be a near-death experience, but getting through it meant peace and joy for life. But Linda, always vibrant and lively, causing trouble, rarely even got sick. Meanwhile, Tina was the sickly one from childhood. So no one took that prediction seriously until Linda died, utterly without the will to live. Linda's been dead set on ending her life. Couldn't stop it. Tina was both laughing and crying. I stopped it once before, but I didn't expect it to happen again. If Linda really wants to leave this world, no one can stop her. I listened, numbed out, no emotions on my end. Tina said a lot more, probably about past life stuff, but none of it included Linda, so I just couldn't focus. I don't want Linda to die. I don't want you gone either. Before she left, Tina hit me with this line. She looked at me, a smile even sadder than crying on her face. But even after all those words, you still chose to stay by Linda's side. So Ben, go ahead and hate me. I stayed silent. Linda slept for ages. I hung out at the hospital with her for over a week. In the end, Mr. David just couldn't watch anymore. He dragged me out of there, tough love style. You think good grades give you a pass to do whatever? His eyes were red, but he acted all stern. Valedictorian, you want to throw that away? Linda's waiting to be on TV with you for an interview. I stared blankly at Mr. David, lost for words. Guess I looked pretty pitiful. Mr. David softened up a bit. He made me promise it wouldn't mess with my schooling. Then he let me come back at night to be with Linda. A lot went down while Linda was asleep. Like that boy woke up. The day after, his parents involved the cops. Even though he was weak, he cleared Linda's name. And then there's the guy Linda saved, who ended up accusing her of assault. He got sued too. Tina pulled out a recording pen. And everyone heard that guy mocking Linda, no holds barred, blaming her for turning him down. He was like, she's got a record. Getting touchy when saving me was only natural, right? It's not like I kicked her on purpose. People just react in the moment, don't they? Even if Linda did end herself, It wouldn't be on me. Don't pin it on me. Linda went from villain to everyone's hero overnight. More and more folks came by to see her in the hospital. Sometimes I couldn't even get in. In the end, Tina's family took Linda overseas for treatment. They'd already lined up specialists there ages ago. It's just that Tina went to bat and had specialists brought here first. But some equipment wasn't available domestically, so Linda had to ship out for treatment soon. Mr. Du gave me a reassuring pat. You hit the books. Maybe Linda can see you on TV one day. I quietly stared at that empty hospital bed and mumbled an okay. Linda surviving is really more than good enough. Things seemed to go back to normal. I went to school and back like usual. Did my work-study thing. Mike and the guys would swing by sometimes, act mean and ask if anyone was giving me trouble, so they could fight my battles. And every time, Leo would yank their ears and lecture them. They'd apologize, all well-behaved, only to do it again later. No one mentioned Linda, as if she never existed, until summer came around the next year. I was in junior year. I got to class early and found a familiar figure in my seat. I looked at that back, stunned on the spot. The few early birds in class were whispering, "Isn't that Tina from First High?" No way, my friend from First saw her this morning. Super happy. Doesn't Tina have a twin sister? Her name is Linda. I blurted out urgently. Linda turned, that all too familiar mischievous grin on her face. Long time no see. You've grown prettier, she teased, pretending to seriously ponder while stroking her chin. Isn't it wild? This wooden logs bloomed into a beautiful flower? I was speechless, my vision blurring. In that haze, I watched Linda walk toward me, step by step, just like back in that alleyway. She walked towards me against the light, reaching out her hand. Her smile, as always, was bright and bold. She said, "Ben, I'm here to see you."